Hello and welcome to the Damon Rohan Podcast. I'm Damon Rohan and this is officially episode 1 of the podcast. I've been very excited to get started into podcasting since I started my coaching business, so without further ado, I'll get right into it. So today I'm going to be covering one of the more common topics in fitness and an area I've worked on regularly with clients, and that is fat loss. So for this episode I'm going to be going over the key aspects affecting fat loss, some of the methods I use with clients, and how you can use these to take steps towards achieving your own fat loss goals. So for fat loss, or any goal you have in general, my advice is to keep the long-term change in mind. And so what I mean by this is work towards your goals and make a plan that'll accommodate you, your lifestyle, and doesn't become too overwhelming or stressful in the process. So the reason I say this is you'll be able to create a way of working towards results that's both sustainable and enjoyable for you, and that'll help to ensure you stick to the plan for the long term and be able to maintain and continue to build on the results you get, as opposed to a quick fix that's a lot of work for a short time with the results only lasting a short time too. So another thing that'll help keep you on track is setting a strong reason as to why you're doing what you're doing. So in terms of fat loss, it might be something like you feel like looking good for a holiday, overcoming a personal insecurity, or just simply because you want to be a slimmer and healthier person in general. So having a good reason as to why you're working towards your goal is going to help in keeping you focused and driven for the long term, and it'll help you push through barriers on days that you don't feel like putting in the work, and you'll get it done anyway. So getting into fat loss, the 3 major focuses you'll be putting your attention towards is nutrition, training, and sleep. So for diet and nutrition to start off with, try to prioritize your nutrition as the first and foremost aspect of fat loss. The reason I say this is because having your nutrition in check is going to cut out a lot of the surrounding work, and ultimately it'll probably be the decider in whether you achieve your fat loss goals or not. So you probably heard before that you can't out-train a bad diet, and this really holds true in regards to achieving any meaningful results relating to body composition. So in terms of diet and nutrition for fat loss, there's a few things you want to consider. First thing would be calories in versus calories out. So what this essentially means is for you to lose body weight and fat, your body has to be using more calories than it's taking in on a consistent basis. So to get a rough idea on how many calories your body's using on a daily basis, I'd advise using a TDEE calculator. That's total daily energy expenditure, and there's plenty of them to choose from if you Google them. So it's worth mentioning that although these calculators aren't entirely accurate, as it'll give you a rough figure to work off of, and from there you should try a bit of trial and error in trying to hit a calorie deficit of about 200, 300, even maybe more calories under the figure that it gives you for your maintenance calories. And then try that out regularly until you find a figure or range of calories that works for you, in that you're both losing weight and consistently hitting your calorie target without actually placing too much stress or strain on yourself. So for tracking calories, there's actually a number of approaches you can try depending on your preferences. If you like to pay attention to detail and be that bit more meticulous, then trying an app like MyFitnessPal where you can scan in foods and it shows you their calories and macros, this approach would be much more suited to you. This way it allows you to collect data and build up a log of what you're doing and what you're eating on a consistent basis, and you can use that as a kind of a revision on what you want to do and improve from there. My advice though is if you do choose this approach is to not get too caught up in the numbers and worrying about being exact all the time, as this is actually going to worsen your relationship with food and your perspective on healthy eating, and the reason that can be bad is for achieving and maintaining your results in the long term. So instead use the app more like a tool for the first while, and that once you get to a place where you're more confident in understanding how many calories and macros you're putting into your body on a regular basis, you can then begin to use the app less and become more independent in eating foods based off your own intuition. Now on the other hand, if you prefer to eat more intuitively rather than weighing and scanning in all your foods, there's also an approach for this. So here you can use the size of your hand to gauge your meal size portions. And since everyone's hands is kind of relative to their size, this approach actually works fairly well from person to person. So the idea is that for each meal you should have about a portion of protein about the size of the palm of your hand. Your carb portion should be about the size of your fist clenched. Your vegetable portion should also be about the size of your fist clenched. And then a portion of healthy fats about the size of your thumb. Now this can differ from person to person slightly in that men might need upwards 2 sizes for each portion mentioned, whereas women might lie towards the end of about 1 size for each portion mentioned. Now again, this approach can involve some trial and error in finding out exactly what works for you in terms of meal size portions, but these are good general guidelines to begin with. So after you have those initial guidelines taken into account, you can then move on to putting practices in place that will further help maximize your fat loss results. So here I'm just going to list off a few things that you can do to help with your fat loss. If you'd like more detail on these points, I actually have a healthy eating ebook available, which is entirely free when you sign on to my email list. That was a shameless plug, but I'll leave a link to that in the podcast notes if you feel you're interested. So getting onto the list, the first thing is to drink more water. So keeping on top of your water intake is obviously going to have a lot of health benefits in general, but in the context in regards to fat loss, drinking more water is actually going to help you manage your hunger, reduce cravings, and you'll feel a lot better in general as a result. And what this is going to do is help stave off and safeguard many of the aspects and habits that contribute to gaining fat, as it helps your body and mind to work optimally and essentially creates a better environment for you to stay on track and succeed. So the second thing is to reduce processed foods. Now processed foods often pose the biggest issue to people people who are trying to lose weight, and one of the main reasons for this is because they're foods that contain a lot of calories but actually provide very little nutritional value. So eating processed foods essentially spikes up your calorie intake for the day, but having very little to no nutrients, your body will start to crave those nutrients because of this, and it'll likely lead to eating more in place of this. And the next thing is to eat more vegetables. So you've probably heard every coach harping on about this, but there's actually good reason behind this. So this goes hand in hand with reducing processed foods, as eating more vegetables and nutrient-dense foods is actually going to lead to less cravings, and in turn reduce the likelihood of you eating processed foods in place of them. So vegetables are also naturally quite high in fibre, while low in calories too, which means you can eat a lot of vegetables and remain full for longer without having to eat too many calories. Now, as a side note to this, I didn't mention eating fruit, and obviously I agree with eating fruit as an excellent healthy alternative to processed foods, but the only reason I didn't say it is people tend to naturally prioritise sugary fruit over the intake of veg, and it's important you get a nice mix of both in your diet. So as a final note to this on diet and nutrition is, after you have your initial guidelines in place, my last piece of advice is to make the plan work for you. So what I mean by this is to get to a place where you're both making progress but also enjoying your relationship with food. Like, a lot of people can fall into the trap of thinking all or nothing, and that they can't have any treats or anything like that in case it ruins the results, and once they slip up they cave in completely and will likely binge eat, doing a lot more damage as a result. So instead, try to get to a place where you're eating healthy, nutritious foods most of the time, but can allow yourself to enjoy the odd treat without beating yourself up about it. So for most people, this is usually a ratio where about 80% of your calories are coming from healthy, nutritious foods, with the remaining 20% coming from foods of your choice. And you can then adjust that ratio a bit when you become more familiarised with the process and can align it with whatever results or goals you want to achieve. So this will help you keep a balance and make meaningful change in your approach to food for the long term, helping you build and maintain your hard-earned results. So as a little side note on nutrition, I'm going to go into supplements. Now, supplements can be a great way of improving your results for any goal. However, it's important to recognise that supplements won't do all the work for you, and that you have to have the basics right in terms of your diet, training and sleep to get the best out of your supplements and ensure that you'll actually achieve the results you want. So supplements are essentially a way of supplementing the body of work and effort you're already putting in, and there's no magic pill that'll replace that hard work. So getting into supplements, the first one I recommend is green tea extract. Green tea extract is the concentrated form of green tea, and one of the main compounds in green tea extract is ECGC. So this helps to elevate your metabolism while also providing a decent amount of caffeine, and caffeine helps to promote weight and fat loss as it's shown to suppress appetite. And that actually brings me on to the next supplement I'm recommending, and that's caffeine. So as mentioned in the previous point, caffeine assists with weight and fat loss through promoting appetite suppression, and while this can be helpful, it's important not to become overly dependent on caffeine. So some people can rely too much on caffeine to keep them feeling energized without eating a lot throughout the day, and this can actually create an unhealthy relationship with food, in that you'll lose weight and fat, yes, but at the cost of lacking proper nutrition and possible fatigue as a result. So try to use caffeine as a useful tool in part of your diet, as opposed to over-relying on it as the main source of your results, as you'll likely eventually binge as a result of this and lose the results you gained in the first place from that approach. So caffeine also provides you with a mental boost, making it particularly useful around training times, as it'll allow you to train harder for longer, and further complementing the fat burning process in allowing you to burn more calories as you train. So that fairly covers the basics in regards to improving your nutrition towards fat loss. If you get these basics right, you'll no doubt start to see results, and once you can carry these out on a consistent basis, you can look further into different aspects and elements you can add to your diet and nutrition to further help the process. So the main thing is that you can do most of these things consistently and don't overcomplicate it on yourself, in that you're taking on too much and it stresses you and you don't enjoy it. Like, of course, fat loss goals should and will involve sacrifice, but make sure you're striking a balance and that you're enjoying your food during the process and don't become miserable and ruin your relationship with food as a result. So the next thing I want to move on to is how you approach your training. So for training, there isn't actually one singular approach that works for everyone for fat loss. However, there are a few principles and do's and don'ts that you can use to optimize your training when fat loss is your goal. So first off, in regards to training style, I would say train with your main focus being to place tension on the muscles. So what I mean by this is to aim to tear muscle fibers by creating the right amount of stress onto them through prolonged tension. So this training style actually helps to elevate your metabolism, in that your body will have to use a lot more calories and energy in repairing these muscle fibers, and as a result help in the process of burning more calories and energy than you're taking in. So the method to apply here is to do your reps slower and more mindfully, instead of just going through the motions and banging out reps. So try to take that extra second or two it takes to complete each rep and challenge the muscles involved in each exercise. So after that, the next aspect to consider is your rep range. So you'll want to incorporate a rep range of about 8 to 12 reps on each set to place the optimum stress in regards to tearing muscle fibers. Rep ranges below this will fall into the category of strength training more so, and rep ranges above this is in more endurance style training. So 8 to 12 reps seems to be kind of the sweet spot for most people in relation to fat loss goals. So after that, the next aspect you want to consider is your rest times. So try to keep rest times between sets and exercises relatively short at about 45 to 60 seconds. This is going to help keep your heart rate and metabolism elevated while also placing more stress on the muscles as you're giving them little time to recover between sets. So after considering all that, the next thing you want to move on to is cardio versus weights training. So to get the best out of your training, I'd advise leaving cardio until after you've completed your weights training. And the reason I say this is because when you're weight training, it tends to place greater metabolic stress on your body than cardio, and your body uses its glucose and glycogen stores as first source of energy. And these energy stores are mostly from the food you've eaten before training and in the past 1 or 2 days. So after working out with weights for the first part of your session, you placed a lot of metabolic stress on your body and have likely used up these energy stores. And after these energy stores have been depleted, your body then uses its fat stores as the next source of energy. So doing cardio for the final part of your session will actually prove more effective in burning fat, as you'll likely be tapping into your fat stores at that stage and getting a better bang for your buck than if you'd done cardio before weights. So in terms of what type of cardio you should do, the 2 most popular approaches are HIIT and LIST. So HIIT is high intensity interval training, with LIST being low intensity steady state training. Personally, I prefer HIIT as I find it more time efficient and effective in terms of burning fat, as it elevates your metabolism much more in comparison to LIST. Plus, I find HIIT also offers more variation and intensity, which keeps things fun and exciting in terms of training. So both essentially work and have their place in training. However, I just find my personal bias to lean towards HIIT as opposed to LIST from the results I've seen it yield. So after applying those aspects to training, I have a few more small tips, not so much on training itself, but on movement and staying active in general, that can help you with your fat loss goals. So first off, try to get your 10,000 steps in every day. This is going to help you keep more mindful about how active you are every day, and it'll help you keep more active in general as a result, which can compound the results you're already making. And if you have a Fitbit or a phone app or some device that records your steps, it's all the better. However, one piece of advice I'll give is to not obsess over the steps as the be all and end all, much like the calories in the MyFitnessPal app. If you don't hit your daily target, that's no problem. Don't let your mood or sense of self-worth be affected by numbers on a screen. Like going for walks and runs most days is going to help keep your step count up while also improving your mood and mindfulness in general. And remember that if you want to live a healthy and active lifestyle, little things like this is going to contribute towards that and help you along the way in making that transition. And the next little tip on movement in general is going to be stretching. So try to stretch every day if possible, even if only for a few minutes. This is going to help you keep your body supple, flexible and ready for movement, which will likely encourage you to keep moving around more often. And you'll also feel more energetic with an improved mood after stretching, as stretching can remove much of the strain around your body, which contributes towards stress, and that can be a really helpful contribution towards your fitness in general. And the last topic I'm going to touch on is sleep. So sleep and recovery in general is going to play a large part in any health and fitness goals you have, and this is because allowing yourself to rest and recharge is going to set you up better to both physically and mentally stay consistent with your goals. So try to get in between 7 and 9 hours sleep each night. And getting the right amount of sleep alone is actually going to help you hugely with your willpower throughout the day, as tiredness usually wanes on that. And along with this, your energy levels, mood and hunger is better regulated as a result, which removes much of the stress and side effects of tiredness that can also affect how you stay on track and maintain results. So it's worth placing your priorities on getting a good night's sleep by doing things maybe such as getting a good morning and evening routine in place, as that can help massively in how you approach and consistently succeed with this side of things. Another few small tips are things like try not to have caffeine too late in the day, as its half-life and quarter life can drag up to about 6 to 9 hours after you consumed it, which means the caffeine will still be in your system and affecting your sleep if you had it around 6 in the evening. Also, try not to take a nap too late in the day, as it can affect sleep. And finally, also try to avoid screens, as they release a blue light that affects melatonin release in your brain, which is associated with sleep quality. So if you're really struggling with screens, I'd recommend trying blue light filter glasses as a way of helping with some of the blocking of blue light, but do try find a way of blocking out screens completely so that you can improve your quality of sleep. And in regards to recovery in general, it's important that you allow yourself to rest optimally, so to create the best environment for you to perform and succeed in your fat loss goals. Like as I've mentioned about stretching, it'll help you to recover faster and removing the stiffness and helping keeping your muscles supple. And I actually have an ebook on a full daily stretching routine along with video guides that I'll leave in the podcast notes also, and you can further complement this by adding in some foam rolling on tight areas and sore areas and muscle groups to help further with the process of recovery. And that pretty much wraps up the major aspects affecting fat loss and how you can apply certain practices and getting results out of your fat loss journey. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week. This has been the Damon Rohan Podcast. Thank you.